Welcome back into Basketball by Association. My name is Basketball. That is Association. Welcome in Association. It's been a while since we spoke. About a week.
It has been. I got to go change my birth certificate if this is where we're going.
Just get a new one.
Yeah, I'll just make sure it says I was born in the U.S. this time. Anyway.
So if Ron Artest can do it, you can do this. It's fine.
You know, it's funny that you bring up Ron Artest. It's a perfect segue that you didn't even know you were making. Because, Arky, Shea, this is episode 93 of Basketball by Association. That's right. I did get my numbers correct this time. Episode 93. You can catch us on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. You can get the video version on YouTube. And we only have two choices to name this episode after. One of whom is Ron Artest, who we already got 2 weeks ago because he wore 91 a lot, and then 93 is the number that he wore with the Sacramento Kings. So there's only one other. And he is a guy that you and I know full well from our days as basketball fans in the 90s. He is one of the consummate grit guys from that era. Like when you look up grit in the dictionary, his name is right there. It's not Charles Oakley. Oakley never wore 93, but he was a very Charles Oakley-like player. In fact, Charles Oakley and this gentleman squared up, and I do mean that literally, plenty of times against one another. And this was a guy who never averaged more than 11 points in his career. In fact, he only did that one time. Never even averaged 10 boards a game, although he was at 9 a handful of times. But he was a consummate starting power forward. He was the guy that's going to make the right play on defense, the right play on offense, maybe knock down a mid-range jumper, grabbing an offensive rebound, and he was going to fight you the entire time he did it. And do you want any other clues before we go on? Jeff Van Gundy was not a fan of this guy, and neither were any of the players on the Jeff Van Gundy, Charles Oakley Knicks, because this was a team they kept running into in the playoffs, and some all-time classic playoff series between these two teams.
Who?
It's P.J. Brown, who was on those Miami Heat teams with Alonzo Mourning. Did wear number 93, but
P.J. Brown's getting his own episode.
He is. P.J. Brown's going to get it, and he deserves it. Some fun facts about P.J. He wore 42 most of his career. 93 was just the one season on the 08 Boston Celtics.
Oh, my God. He made it to 08?
Yeah, he made it to 08. He played 18 games for those Boston Celtics, so he barely qualifies here. But he did play for 6 different teams, including the New Orleans /OKC Hornets during the Hurricane Katrina season. Played 4 seasons for the Miami Heat, which is probably where he's best known. Did 3 seasons at the beginning with the Nets. Did one with the Bulls and with the Celtics. And I did not know this until I got to Basketball Reference. And no, it's not that P.J. Brown's nickname was Big Cat. I had never heard that. It's that P.J. has nothing to do with his name. His first name is Collier. His name is Collier Brown Jr., but went by PJ, and that works for me. So
he just likes nighttime garb. I get it. Yeah,
I get
it. Wait, hold on. So was it 07 or 08 that the Celtics won the title?
So
was he on that title team?
I do not believe he's on the title team. Okay. No, he is 08. But he only logged 18 games for them. So he did get his title at the very end of his career. That's my bad. I was off by a year. So 2008 NBA champ. He was a 3-time all-defensive player. So not super highly lauded except on that defensive end. And again, we're talking about a guy who total career played almost 1,100 games, averaged 9 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. Mm-hmm. But man, he was like, if you needed a starter and somebody to fight those big, super talented power forwards of the era, the Charles Barkley, Karl Malones, even, Charles Oakley, Kevin Garnett, guys like that. P.J. Brown was going to be there, and he was going to work you.
By the way, I remember him and like Charlie Ward, right? Former Florida State quarterback in New York Knicks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. P.J. Brown was prick, whatever. So all right, it's fine. But like,
he was also 6'11", and Charlie Ward was what, like 6'2", 6'3"?
Yeah,
there was
there's some physicality differences there. I'll tell you this, like there used to be a spot in the NBA for just agitators, like teams, just good teams, really good, successful teams had just a dude that knew how to get under people's skins. And there's a few of them I think that are still out there, but I think I think we're losing them, and I don't. I mean, so many people.
I would agree with that. Almost every team had to have at least one if they were going to be good, and a lot of them had multiples. And then you had, it seems like the New York Knicks, where it was half the roster, right? And the Pacers knew how to do that to people too. It seemed like half that roster was just,
it's weird.
Getting into it.
It's weird that you say that. Like, as a Knicks fan, like I sort of never took that into account. That like, a third to a half of my roster during like the height of the Knicks in modern day was a bunch of Richards. Yeah, they're just a bunch of dudes running around being jerks to other people. I mean,
and it was the bad boy Pistons, and to some extent the Celtics before them, because the Celtics played that way quite a bit. Detroit just really kind of took it to that art form where instead of 1/3 of the roster, it was 99.5% of the roster. And then after that template was
there was
set,
like two nice guys on that team. Like Allen Houston was like the only like nice guy on that team.
Yeah, and that's late Pistons. That's not even bad boy Pistons, I'm sorry.
I'm thinking about my Knicks. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like two good dudes on the roster. Like sort of like Patrick Ewing was a kind of nice, but like he was the guy that was being protected for the most part,
right,
by everybody. Because like I mean,
that was Oakley and Mason's job.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Their job was, hey, that's the franchise. Nobody F's with the franchise. Okay, so get after it.
Yeah, but then I mean, you think of Chris Childs like to get under people's skin. John Starks, obviously, that was his entire MO.
John Starks was this big. If you're not watching, like he's like half a foot tall. Like he's so tiny, and like he was one of those dudes. Great. Man, I do miss that kind of NBA. I'll be honest with you. Like I do. There's a few.
We miss it in nostalgia, but when you go back and watch the games and how slow paced it is and how long you gotta wait for
what
a
I mean
basket,
is like having like certain elements of that.
Okay.
Yeah, like if you had like a few or more of those dudes in the modern NBA, I think I'd be all right with it. Like there's dudes out there. There's a few out there that just don't like other people, which is good.
But at the same time, you didn't speak very laudatory of Grayson Allen last weekend, and Grayson Allen pulling the same kind of crap that like that your
there's
Knicks
being
and the
physical
Pacers
and there's being like
and,
dangerous, right? Like there's a difference between like I think he sort of had the, like he's tripping dudes like back at Duke. Like there's a difference between getting up at people's grill and doing a little chest shoving and stuff and saying you're not going to get into the paint. And there's a difference between when guys get past you, tripping them, or like when they get past you, like elbowing them in the face and breaking them and end up causing their wrists to be broken. So there's a difference between just being a dirty guy and someone who's sort of doesn't like people physically. Anyway, listen, that's a lot. Congratulations, PJ Brown. You're a world champion, and you get your own episode here on Basketball by Association. So I don't think we're going to ever bring his name up again, actually. Maybe at the end of the episode, who knows?
At the end of the episode, we'll...
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so I wanted to bring up a couple of very important things on this here podcast. One, we'll get to injuries in a minute. How about our Atlanta Hawks? Our Atlanta Hawks are on a 7-game winning streak right now, I think. And Joel, this team, I can't remember who said it, but I agree with them. They're kind of playing like the Hawks we thought they would be. They're playing a little like last year's Hawks. And Joel, look, they're only, I think, 10th in the East right now, so I want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But since that trade, right, the trade that the Knicks, I guess, refused to play Cam Reddish, nice job, Tom Thibodeau. Just, I saw someone say about him, by the way, real quick, and we'll probably never bring up the Knicks again on this podcast today. Someone said Tom Thibodeau's never a day in his life without Taj Gibson and Derrick Rose. Why would he start now?
Right.
So,
Where's Luol Deng and Kirk Heinrich when you need them?
Exactly. Where Tom Thibodeau should be, probably, to be honest. These Hawks, and we can only spend a moment, but I just think because they're so hot right now, they kind of have something sort of figured out. There's still a long way to go in the season for them to be able to catch up and, maybe not get number 2 in the East. But like, there's not a bunch of teams in front of them that you think that that are shoe-ins to be able to win the division or to beat them on a night-to-night basis. And there's also flawed and injured teams ahead of them.
They are 7.5 games out of first place in the East, and 5 games out of being safe for the playoffs. And the Charlotte Hornets, who sit in 7th right now at the top of the play-in tournament bracket, are a mere 3 games ahead of them. So better late than never. What the heck took you guys so long? We've talked all year that talent-wise, that was not a problem. There were a lot of injuries. And you look up and down the depth chart right now, it is a fully healthy depth chart. Trae Young is questionable, but that's just kind of semantics at this point.
Right.
Everybody's there. They moved Bogdan Bogdanovic to the bench, which they had been experimenting with a little bit. Maybe the trade deadline started to light a fire under some guys where John Collins goes, hey, I like it here in Atlanta. I signed that big contract. I keep hearing my name come up. Kevin Huerter keeps hearing his name come up in deals, and different guys go, I'm going to lock it in a little bit because I don't actually want to leave. I don't know if that's the case or if it's just a confluence of all those things, or maybe the message is finally getting hit. I want to look too. Let's look at the Hawks' last few games here, though. Because
I was going to bring that up. So I was going to say,
ahead.
Since their 5-game losing streak and they started a 7-game winning streak, they've not beaten bad teams. Like they've beaten Milwaukee, they've beaten Minnesota, they've beaten the Heat, they've beaten the Hornets, who scored 200 against Indiana a couple of nights ago. They've beaten whatever you think about the Lakers and Celtics. Those are teams that can win in any given night.
Yeah,
like
agreed.
This isn't just beating up on Sacramento, which is one of those wins too. Like every single night. So it's an impressive little stretch for a team that we thought was kind of dead in the water for the most part of the season, because that's how they played.
They've been so dead in the water that I have watched them for probably a grand total of about 10 minutes during this win streak. I caught one of their games the other night, not even the one against my Minnesota Timberwolves, which they did win, but I did get to watch them for a little bit, and I think it was the game against Boston, and they were playing well. They were ahead. They were hitting shots. There wasn't anything, again, to be honest, notable I was taking away, so I'm going to dig in a little bit more to them and see if there's something to it stat-wise. But remember, when we looked at them even just a couple weeks ago, what stood out was the problem that nothing stood out. There was no statistical category where you went, yeah, they can hang their hats on that. They were below average across the board in everything. And that was just a really huge warning sign for a team so talented. And it is weird because, okay, if Cam Reddish was not getting along with people or was a poison in the locker room, that would be the first any of us had heard about it, right? Mm-hmm. And bringing in Kevin Knox, who has played a little bit more than he played in New York, but it's not as if he's been a magical needle mover. They did shuffle the starting lineup a little bit, like I said. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to try to get a handle on what is changing for the Atlanta Hawks as they go. But I guess the biggest takeaway for right now is wait and see, because win streaks happen in the NBA, even for bad teams. But now is a great time to get rolling when you have Chicago hurting, you have Brooklyn hurting, you have a handful of teams in front of you like Toronto and Boston who are very catchable, very, very catchable. I think Charlotte's good, but you at least, you got to make it your goal to get into that 6th seed by the end of the season. And when you've got 5 games to make up and 30-plus games to do it, that is a very realistic expectation.
It certainly is. I think one of the more consistent things about them is that you're getting, I think during this stretch, John Collins has like 3 or 4 double doubles, which is he's shooting the ball really efficiently too, and their defense has been more consistent. I've watched a good chunk of like 3 or 4 of those games during the stretch. And
was that to check out how Kevin Knox was doing, or just because?
Oh, I miss Kevin. I just want what's best for him.
I know you're a Trae Young guy, but I was just curious what because you'll watch games, but usually it's not like one team centric. So if the Hawks were pulling you in all of a sudden, what was?
Well, it was after they beat Minnesota where I was like, okay, I think it was 2 in a row, and I was like, okay, this is right after the Cam Reddish trade. Let's just sort of see like this team. Again, you get attached to a team because you predict them in the beginning of the season, and it's like when anything goes good for them, you're like, ooh. Was this all Cam Reddish? What's going on here?
Vindicate me. Vindicate.
Yeah. And so far, I'm feeling a little better about them. But part of me just wonders. I don't know if I wonder if it's
jumped to top 7 now. Part of this again is statistical noise. They've jumped to top 7 in scoring points per game.
Yeah.
Remember they were just average even a couple weeks ago when we last checked in with them. So
like if you look at I talk about their defense. They're giving up. I don't know what the number is, but they've given up over 100 several times during this stretch. But like they're scoring 130 in games. It's different. The Lakers game was a close one, I think. But that was like in the 120s or something like that. But again, this offense, I don't think a lot of people worried about this offense. It was the defense where these guys made their name last year and how they got so hot and so good for so long. You just wonder where all that went to start the season. And I blamed Cam Reddish at this point. So
it's interesting. They're at their first of the season being positive and plus minus now, just barely so, but for them to have changed that even in the short amount of time, I think just speaks to your point. It is interesting to me on a team that has Trae Young, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Kevin Huerter, Lou Williams, a handful of guys who are known for chucking threes, that Atlanta is 22nd in threes attempted on the season. That really is strange. But you do have a few other players like Clint Capella, Onyeka Okongwu and John Collins don't shoot threes, if ever. Collins does a little bit, but just some weird stats with that team all year.
Yeah, Okongwu, by the way, with a massive block against the Lakers, which
he's been playing well off the bench, and maybe him coming back and not having Gorgie Jang, and you're getting a little more spark and punch in the second unit, moving Bogdanovic to that group. Who knows?
Yeah. All right, let's get to a few injuries that are important. Has anybody heard of LeBron James? He plays for the Los Angeles Lakers, one of the two teams that plays in the
of Anaheim.
In Orange County. He plays for one of the two teams in the Crypto.com Staples Arena, and he missed the end of their road trip and missed the game against the Hawks because he had to go back home because his knee's hurting. And in fact, he's 100 years old, at least as far as playoff minutes and game minutes are concerned. But again, Frank Vogel called it general swelling, I think is what he called it, which, by the way, is a nice porn name if you want to put that out there. General swelling is what LeBron James has in his knee. And Joel, this continues, I think, the narrative of we haven't mentioned it yet, but Anthony Davis came back this last week and then promptly left this last week too in a game. Like, this team they're just off. Like you're getting old, LeBron, who looks like he's finally having miles mean something on his body, no matter how good he plays. Anthony Davis, we've talked about it for months and maybe even years since you and I go back to the radio days. A guy that just struggles to play a bunch of games in a season and be somebody you can consistently rely on. This team just struggles to have everything come together at the right time since that championship. Joe, what do you make of general swelling for LeBron James and Anthony Davis coming back and then promptly leaving?
This isn't going to get fixed. They could be dangerous in a playoff series for a few games. There's just as much of a likelihood that they run into a young, hungry team like they did with the Suns last year, who runs them out of the building. And you are looking at a very dangerous situation then when you handed Russell Westbrook that 5-year contract, which will be absolutely immovable. It's gotten so much to the point that they don't want the egg on their face of moving Russ. Russ is a Hall of Famer. He has come in and tried to do the right thing. Like, Russ has not been locker room cancer. He has tried to fit in as best as he can. So I don't think there's like this huge, oh, we got to get rid of him. It's that we know we probably should get rid of him and we can't, and we don't want to say that too loud. But it's gotten to the point where like the only other contract you could move Russell Westbrook for would be John Wall. But and John Wall has proven that he was healthy last year. We haven't seen him since. John Wall as more of a distributor and a little bit more of a shooter might actually make more sense for this Lakers team. But it's gotten to the point that why in the world would the Rockets trade John Wall, who next year is on an expiring deal, to get Russell Westbrook back in the house on a bad team that's going to need mentors, that Russ is not at that mental stage in his career where he's going to be willing to accept that. So you are stuck between the rock and the hard place. And what's tough is like Russ is just a microcosm and the poster child of what is wrong with this Lakers team. Too old, too top heavy. You look down that bench and all of the veterans that they brought in have not played up to what they needed from them. And especially what they need now when you realize that Russ ain't helping you the way you thought. LeBron can't carry you the way you hoped. Anthony Davis has not stayed healthy the way you should have anticipated. So even if Carmelo Anthony can still come out and score 10 points in his sleep, he's not stopping anybody else and he's not giving you anything else. And your centers look old and broken down. Trevor Ariza, who they were hoping, waiting on to come back, like maybe he can do more than Kent Bazemore did, than Avery Bradley did as kind of like our veteran stopper type of guy in the lineup, has done absolutely nothing more than that. Wayne Ellington looks as old as 34 and, you know, will hit a shot here or there, but there's nothing you're getting. It's only the young guys, the couple of young guys. Malik Monk is putting up some points. Talen Horton-Tucker looks like a decent young guy who is above replacement level, which is really nice when you figure that he was a G League guy. Not so nice when you realize he became a LeBron guy last year and 2 years ago, and so you handed him $10 million a year for 3 years to keep LeBron happy. And even somebody like Austin Reeves, who played above his pay grade at the beginning of the season, as soon as you start asking too much of a kid like that, you see why that's a problem. So they don't have trade bait unless you're moving LeBron.
They're in such a bad position right now. Like, and this team doesn't deliver as is for the most part. Like, they can't really get much better, right? There's just not a lot of wiggle room for them as far as just movement in general. Like, if you want to move dudes on this team, like, you can't. And they sort of knew that going into the season. I mean, they got older guys that were kind of cheaper because they didn't have much room to spend anyway for this team. So it's tough, man. LeBron missed like with 3 straight games now, and like it's the thing with the dude that's this age has played this much basketball. Plus, he's been so good over the last month and a half or so. I think I saw that he had over 25 points in 18 straight games, and 17 of those were without Anthony Davis in the lineup. And he had played so well. I think he got himself to like second in the NBA in scoring average. He had done so much to try to put this team on his back, and they're still 3 games under 500. They've lost 7 of 10, and LeBron can't carry a team in 2021, no matter how good he is, to put him into like home court advantage, not by himself. He just can't do it. He can't do it. And for the Lakers, I don't know how creative they're going to be able to get to make any kind of moves before the deadline to make this team a significant contender when you're battling these kind of health issues constantly.
I don't think there's a significant move because a lot of the ring chasing type of guys already made their choices during this offseason. You might get a couple that, you know, come out of the woodwork and might even be a little bit surprising, but there's not going to be any needle movers out of that. And then you go into next offseason, and the fact that LeBron is getting older, the fact that there have been times where he's thrown guys under the bus, and that's a well-known thing. Russ is not a cuddly, you know, teammate that a lot of guys are going to be drawn to coming to play for. He's been very divisive. There's a lot of guys who swear by him and say, oh, he's not as bad as people say. And I get that. I believe that. But I don't think there's a lot of guys signing up that say, I have to go play with Russell Westbrook. Anthony Davis, I don't think anybody really dislikes the guy, but why would I sign up except for maybe the location? If I really want to be in LA, I want the sunshine, whatever. Why would I sign up to go there when I have a better chance to win a ring in Miami, pay fewer taxes, and have as nice of a place to be? I can go to Brooklyn, even though they're, slumping a little bit with KD out. Like, they're not going away next year. Yeah, maybe Milwaukee and Philly and Denver, the locale, and the fact that it's really a one-star type of location. Maybe I'm not willing to take a major pay cut to go there to ring chase, but why wouldn't I go to Golden State? You can, and there's a few other teams out there too. Like, you can name at least a half dozen teams that if you are a ring chasing veteran who does not need any more money, that are probably more attractive places to be than the Lakers. And that has changed just in this year. So that, again, you don't have the cap flexibility, you don't have the draw and the appeal, and you don't have the short-term fixes here available to you. Like, as this team ages, if they cannot get out from under any of these contracts, which I don't see that happening, barring, again, you moving Anthony Davis because he asks to be traded, or LeBron saying, hey, I'm going to retire for a year, 2 years, void my contract and wait and get healthy again, wait until my kid comes back and then go sign with my kid's team, which could be a very possible thing. I don't see any other solutions to this, and it could be bad for a couple of years here. Like, you could be looking at, we said we wouldn't bring them up again, like Knicks level bad, where you had some really top heavy contracts on old guys and nothing you could do about it besides wait.
Well, we're not going to talk about them. Only you brought them into this just to compare to how bad they could be. So thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chill. That feels good. Bad thing is, like, this this Lakers team actually still is competitive for the playoffs. That Knicks team we're talking about, no.
That is true. And like I said, I do believe that they get into a playoff series, especially against the right matchup. There's enough veteran know-how there and enough guys who've been in that position, and especially if Anthony Davis is upright and LeBron, you just need that good series from him. Russ is able to, play within himself. There's no reason that team could not win a playoff series within reason.
Let's get to another injury, probably one that you yourself may have watched last night with Minnesota taking on Utah. Joe Ingles goes down, suffers a significant left knee injury. In fact, just before we came on here to the record, it was reported that the knee injury is a torn ACL, and Joe Ingles is out for the season. Not the team's leading scorer, not the team's leading rebound, but a significant, a strong piece that is played in just about every one of their games this season. Joe, what does this mean for Utah going forward throughout the rest of the season?
I would say that Joe Ingles was arguably their third, maybe fourth, but in my mind, third most important piece on that team. And that's, counting Bojan Bogdanovic, Mike Conley, and Royce O'Neal, who are the other, and Jordan Clarkson, too, the other key guys in that rotation. Joe Ingles was the guy that they typically brought off the bench. He had no problem with that. He solidified the second unit, playing with lesser players, but getting them into positions to succeed. No problem hitting a big shot, but he just played within himself and he kept the machinery moving. He was also the guy that Mike Conley, who misses a lot of games at this point in his career, whether by injury or rest, Ingles would be the starter in those games then. And you had both Ingles and Donovan Mitchell bringing the ball down and switching off to play point guard when your actual point guard would sit. And that would allow Jordan Clarkson to remain coming off the bench, also playing point guard, which was kind of his sweet spot. Clarkson is a guy that you don't want as the full-time point guard. So having him in rotation and then having Joe Ingles on the floor with him just gave you that safety valve. It allowed Clarkson to go and freelance and do what he does best. But you could also set him up where he didn't have to score off his own dribble. So Joe Ingles is really one of the more valuable glue guys in the NBA for a team that, again, outside of Donovan Mitchell's ability to freelance and manufacture points, and then Jordan Clarkson's, just doesn't have it otherwise. Bogdanovich is a system scorer that you want to set up and you want to get him into his rhythm and scoring. Mike Conley cannot take over games anymore. Rudy Gobert is not a scorer. You got to spoon feed him and get him points. Royce O'Neal is out there for defense, and somebody coming off the bench like Rudy Gay or Eric Paschall, Hassan Whiteside, they can get you some points. But again, you're not running plays for those guys. And when you did run plays, it was Joe Ingles who was going to wind up touching the ball an awful lot to get you into what you did, and very good defender. So this is bad news for a Utah Jazz team that all of a sudden has lost. I think it's 8 out of their last 10, 7 out of their last 10, and has fallen. They were top 3. They're 4th place now, behind Memphis, who's jumped ahead. You've got Denver and Dallas just 1 game behind them. Little bit more breathing room, 3.5, 4 games before you get into the play-in field, but it's not a lot. And teams like the Clippers or the Timberwolves or even the Lakers, if somebody can get right out of that group, could catch up to Utah real fast. Now, Utah's well coached. They're talented. I don't see them falling out of the top 6, but I do think that this may be the difference between them having stayed in the 3 to 4 seed and hosting a playoff series, between them probably falling into that 6th seed, and that's where they wind up. That is a big blow to their season.
Yeah, this is not a great time to be trending in that direction. I worry a little bit about Donovan because it's a concussion issue, right? Like there's a thought that he might have been able to come back late last week, and he's missed a couple more games since then. And sure, you want to be very sure that he's okay, but concussion things sort of scare me. Like guys don't come back all the time as quickly as you think they should be able to. And sometimes these things linger. I mean, think about who's the hockey player? Sidney Crosby. Like, dude was basically sitting out of seasons because of so those kind of things worry me just a little bit. I think in that game also where Joe Ingles got hurt, I think Rudy Gobert was out for like his 4th or 5th straight game.
Yep.
In that game too. Like, this just doesn't feel like a great stretch right now for the Jazz, and losing Joe Ingles to injury obviously just adds even more injury to injury, because that's not something that's going to be helpful to you by any stretch. And it's a team that's already dealt with, their fair share at this point. And it doesn't help, like you say, that Phoenix is white hot right now. They're on another giant winning streak. I think they've won 9 or 10 in a row. Golden State has won like 5 or 6 in a row. They're winning a whole bunch of games.
Yeah, they're continuing to play at pace. Golden State is not off of their pace from before.
Yeah, they're about as good as we saw them, except for like 7 minutes of a slump earlier this season. The Grizzlies exploded over the last month and a half or so, and they've been really, really good. And then Dallas
and have gotten healthy, with the exception of Dylan Brooks, who they're still waiting on to come back again. But I mean,
and Dallas and Denver are both playing really, really good basketball right now. It's not a great time in general for them to be sort of slumping, but more importantly, for them to lose a big piece like Joe Ingles, like that could take a little bit of time for adjustment, especially not knowing when Mitchell's going to come back or Rudy Gobert is going to be able to come back, and then to figure out what that lineup's going to look like. So
Utah has also been one of the very few teams, also like the San Antonio Spurs, that almost never make deals at the trade deadline. They've historically never been active at that point.
So do you change your mind now?
I think you start to look at that, and again, so much is dependent on who becomes available and for what price and all of that stuff. They did move on from their longtime GM. There was kind of a shuffling in that front office here recently, so it is possible that they take a different approach to it. You look up and down the roster and you go, I'm not sure exactly who out of that group is really attractive trade bait to where you're going to get something in return that you need, because a lot of their bench, since Utah is not a free agent destination, a lot of the end of that bench are young guys, G League level guys. And so you really got to find somebody out there who is interested in that type of player and has somebody usable that they're going to give up. So I'm not sure there's a needle mover, but
I don't know. Utah also just brought back in Danny Ainge into the fold as CEO of basketball operations.
Right.
And that's a guy who was GM of the Celtics, not afraid to sort of make moves.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, you do a little nudge, wink, wink. Know what I mean? Let's make a little music here while we can. So I don't know. There's I feel bad for Utah. I feel bad for the Bulls. We talked about last week and stuff, like two teams that are losing key pieces. The Bulls more so right now, but they're going to get their pieces back. So it's
and those are both teams that, due to their depth issues,
and Cleveland, by the way, I should mention Cleveland, even though they're still playing pretty well.
JB Bickerstaff honestly deserves a major consideration for Coach of the Year at this point. I know the Suns are streaking, and I know there's some other good teams out there, but the fact that Cleveland continues to sit in 4th place and 10 games above 500.
They've won 8-2, and they're losing all their guards.
Being that young and with all those injuries, I think it's time for JB to get a major nod there. But Chicago and Utah, in order for them to win a championship, needed to be fully healthy and have all those things break right.
Yep.
There's a couple of teams out there, including Brooklyn and including Golden State, who are so loaded that you can stand an injury to a top-level guy and still be in the hunt. They're, even like Denver, it just speaks to how good Nikola Jokic is, that he's lost his 2 main, supporting stars, and they're still sitting in the 5th seed.
Yeah,
I don't think
he himself are still putting up triple doubles. Yeah,
Utah does not have as much of room for error there, and Chicago certainly did not. And we're starting to see that play out. As soon as some of those top-level guys have gone down, they have not been able to sustain that, and that was the major worry for Chicago, especially that we talked about at the beginning of this season. Utah, I think maybe took for granted that they'd be able to stay healthy.
One last thing. You got a few more minutes before we get out of here. I wanted to ask you about this was reported over the weekend that the Kings, who were in negotiations and discussions with, at least, with the Philadelphia 76ers about Ben Simmons, they have cut off those trade talks. Apparently, the asking price is very, very steep. This news on top of the news that the Nets have decided they are going to just not even entertain offers for James Harden for until after the season. Joel, what do you make of both of those thoughts? One, let's start with Ben Simmons, who we've talked about all season, as far as whether or not he would be on this team. Sacramento is a team that's willing to move bodies, it looks like, and willing to move very good pieces, and still the asking price is too much for Ben Simmons. What do you think that says about the movability of Ben Simmons and what Philadelphia thinks of him and what they think they can get back?
Anytime those stories come out in the news, you wonder whether it's true that they're backing away from the table or that's just a leverage ploy to try to get the price to drop. The fact that they would say that means that Philadelphia was probably asking for Tyrese Halliburton and or De'Aaron Fox. Absolutely not should you give up either of those players for Ben Simmons. The problem is that you don't know what Ben Simmons wants, because he flaked out completely and then hasn't talked to anybody about this. So does Ben Simmons just want to go back to being the franchise piece on a team, and he doesn't care whether it's a good team or a bad team? He's young enough that he could be a part of a rebuild again, in which case maybe he would make sense for Sacramento. Does Ben Simmons live in such a delusional world that he thinks he should be on a playoff contending team and those are the only places he should go? Why would any of those teams give up a player anywhere equivalent to Ben Simmons when you saw how mentally insecure he was after a tough playoff series, to then go and be willing to torpedo his career, much less really hamstring his franchise, who has completely moved on without him? Why would you do that if you were a playoff team? Though there are a few there maybe on the bubble who would be willing to take that risk if they also have malcontent. So you don't know player-wise what the price point needs to be for Ben Simmons. You don't know what it is mentally for Ben Simmons. There are very few teams in the league who meet either of those qualifications to stomach that and have the type of contracts that can be split up, who would also be helpful types of players for Philadelphia. Sacramento is one of those very few teams. So the market for Ben Simmons is very small. It is very possible that, given the fact that Ben Simmons was a number 1 pick, the amount of money that's been invested, and the fact that Philadelphia needs to contend for a championship, it is very possible that they're asking too much and they're continuing to just play this out because they've said, look, we don't need to trade him this year. I think they should if they can, but they don't need to trade him yet this year. They're willing to let him hang on the vine and hang in the wind the same way that he's done to them. So they probably do have too high of an asking price.
But that does feel a little more vindictive than productive, doesn't it? Like, because what's going to change in the next, let's say, February 10th, the trade deadline, what's going to change in the next, 10 days, 11 days, if you wanted to do it this year?
Draft night is what changes.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, this year, like, there's not really anything that's going to change this year. And even going into draft night, you maybe change some, like, desperation from those, and maybe that forces the price up a little bit on
a team that dropped way down in the lottery, that didn't think they were going to be where they were going to, and now all of a sudden they're drafting 8th instead of 3rd, and goes, look, Ben Simmons is probably going to be better for us than a number 8 pick. And Philly goes, yeah, we'll take a number 8 pick for Ben Simmons. And the other thing that happens is you hit the offseason and those contracts expire all up and down everybody's rosters. You've got a little more cap room to play with and deals become easier. Yes, there are fewer guys available to move, but there's just more flexibility. And right now, again, you only have a very small subset of teams with the cap room and the players that make sense. And then you've got that nebulousness of what Ben Simmons is and or what the Sixers are even offering. And whether Sacramento's just offering hot garbage of some of their, veteran guys who could be helpful for Philly, but Philly still believes they can get that better deal. It's really rough.
All right. And James Harden, quickly, the thoughts that the Nets have, Daryl Morey's basically said, nah, we'll wait.
It would be stupid unless he's demanded a trade, which he absolutely has not. There's been little rumors floating around, but you never know if those rumors are started by a Harden camp or somebody who is trying to, pique his interest to move for him. There's no reason for them to do that. He's proven twice that he can play with Kevin Durant. He's proven that he can fit on that team. Yes, he's been hurt. Yes, the start of the season wasn't great, but he's not a wild card. Kyrie Irving is the wild card where you're worried about what happens, but James Harden has come in and done his job, and I don't think there's been a real problem with that. There's no reason to move him unless he's asking.
Do you think James Harden's interested in being out after the season?
Only if on an interpersonal level he and Durant and or Kyrie are not getting along. Now remember, when Harden was in Houston, how many different big name players came and went through Houston that were supposed to be paired with James Harden, and then all of a sudden wanted out after 2 or 3 years. I mean, it was like clockwork. And
it's been like a year.
Right.
He's been there for like a year.
And he's supposed to be buddies with Durant because they played together in OKC, but you never know, if he's difficult to get along with, or there's just that part, who knows? Maybe it's KD that's difficult. So I don't put any credence to it yet. I think it's too early to try to predict anything like that, but there is a little bit of a worrying track record that he was willing to let guys walk in and out that door in Houston, and this is his 3rd team that he's played for. I don't know, but he's at that stage of his career too, where you're really playing with fire if you believe that you're going to be a franchise player wherever you go. As good as James Harden has been, and as good as he was as an MVP just a couple years ago, those days are not long, and you might as well stay with another MVP level guy in Durant and chase that championship. I don't think you find a better place to do it than where you are.
So weird how not all 3 of them have, seemingly were ever together last year or this year. It just feels like whatever they're putting together is just, it's never those 3 at
There's
the
been a lot of
times.
super teams like that never got their ring because of situations like that. And on paper, it should have been just fine, and it never came together.
Boy, that's a team I can't feel bad for because of how juiced they are. But you sort of look at what could be if you sort of, because it would be when they are all together, they're a super fun team to watch. So
would I be geeked if I see a fully loaded Brooklyn Nets and Golden State Warriors team, in the championship the way that we had predicted? Yeah, that's really the type of matchup we want. But there are a lot of really good teams in the East that if the Nets don't make it, I'm not going to cry. I'll be fine to see Philly or Milwaukee or Miami any of those teams in the
You missed one.
Mm-hmm. You know, it is not a given. As good as Brooklyn has been, it is not a given that they're going to be able to get out of that Eastern Conference at this point.
Absolutely. Just a yes or no, because I'm the one delaying this, even though I got to get off.
Yep.
If the Knicks were in the NBA Finals against whoever you want.
Okay. Well, it's going to be Minnesota because it has to be an apocalyptic type of scenario here.
Well, if it's not against Minnesota, because I know you'd be interested in, but the Knicks were in the, would you be interested?
No. They're not an exciting team to watch. I like some of their individual players, and I like a few more of their players than I have in the past. Do I think that with a different coach that Cam Reddish, RJ Barrett, and Julius Randle, there could be something fun cooking there as they grow up, especially the young two guys? Yeah, absolutely. But where they are right now as a Tom Thibodeau team, sorry. And again, I loved Tibbs when he was with the Bulls early on, those Derrick Rose teams. I loved him, but that has soured a long, long, long time ago.
I like when the Knicks win. But they are really difficult watch.
I honestly would rather see any other team in the NBA Finals in the Eastern Conference than the Knicks, except for the Pacers or the Magic. I would rather
come on.
I would rather watch the Detroit Pistons.
No, you wouldn't. Knock it off. Don't do that.
I'm not being facetious.
Tayshaun Prince isn't on that team. Rip Hamilton's not on that team.
Neither's Torian.
Yeah.
There's a little Easter egg if you listen to the show last week. Look, this is episode 93. It's the PJ Brown episode.
PJ Brown's not on that team.
iTunes. Get your podcast where you get them. Look up Basketball by Association. We're on YouTube if you want the video version. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Arky, Shea, it's been fun.
Thanks, brother.